All right, Raiders fans, welcome back to the channel. We've got some exciting news coming out of the NFL Combine. Let's start with Jaylen Milroe. His hand size has actually grown by more than half an inch since the Senior Bowl last month. That's huge. Literally. Now his hands are bigger than Cam Ward's and Will Howard's, which could give him an edge as a quarterback prospect. But here's where things get interesting. The Raiders are really impressed by both Milroe and Quinn Ewers. This makes it seem like they might not be taking a quarterback with the 6th overall pick after all. Just last week, they were heavily invested in trying to land Matthew Stafford. Unfortunately for them, Stafford re-signed with the Rams, shutting that door completely. Now the Raiders are back to square one, and we're seeing a wave of new QB rumors. Sam Darnold's name is popping up. Russell Wilson is in the mix again. And of course, there's still speculation about Justin Fields, and even Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, I like the idea of signing Rodgers to a one-year deal while drafting someone like Milroe in the 3rd round. Let him learn behind Rodgers for a season, and the Raiders could have their future QB ready to go. But before we dive deeper into Milroe and all the latest Raiders news from the Combine, let's talk about the Stafford situation. The team seriously explored trading for him, but as of Friday, it became official. He's staying with the Rams. Now the Raiders have to pivot, and all eyes are on what they'll do next. One name to keep an eye on? Russell Wilson. With Pete Carroll now the Raiders' head coach, the connection is obvious. They won a Super Bowl together, and there's a long history there. Could a reunion be in the works? Let's break it all down. We're just 12 days away from free agency, and the excitement is building. The legal tampering period kicks off in 10 days, and one of the biggest names on the market? Sam Darnold. He's projected to be the best free agent quarterback available this year. Now, when it comes to the draft, I'm a huge fan of Jaylen Milroe and Will Howard. If the Raiders bring in a veteran QB and draft one of these guys in the 3rd or 4th round, I'm all for it. I'd also be happy with Dillon Gabriel, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, or even Shadir Sanders. The bottom line, the Raiders need to find their quarterback of the future. But when it comes to Russell Wilson, I'm not sold. Sure, his stats last season weren't terrible. He completed 63.7% of his passes, threw for about 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in 11 regular season games with the Steelers. But if you actually watched Pittsburgh in those last 4 to 6 games, including the playoffs, it was a disaster. I don't want the Raiders making that mistake. That said, I do see some positives in Russ's mobility. Shout out to Sanj from the Las Vegas News Network for pointing that out. But let's be real. The Raiders' red zone struggles weren't just about the quarterback. Whether it was Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, or Desmond Ridder last season, nobody could get it done in the red zone. So adding Wilson isn't enough to make me confident. As for Darnold, I like him. He's only 27 and coming off a solid year, but he feels like more of a long-term project rather than the right fit for the Raiders right now. Now, let's get back to Jaylen Milroe. We talked about his hand size earlier, but this is wild. His hands actually grew by more than half an inch since the Senior Bowl. At the Senior Bowl, his hands measured 8 3/4 inches. Fast forward to the Combine, and they came in at 9 3/8 inches. That's a big deal because, in the NFL, the general belief is that quarterbacks with hands smaller than 9 inches usually struggle. So, could Milroe's growth spurt be a sign that he's developing into a legitimate NFL prospect? Let's break it down. Jaylen Milroe's hand size jump isn't just a random stat. It puts him ahead of some big names. A month ago, his hands measured under 9 inches. Now? He's at 9 3/8 inches, which is actually bigger than Cam Ward, who's projected to go number 1 overall, and Will Howard. But here's where things get even more interesting. According to Vic Tafur and Tashin Reed from The Athletic, both Milroe and Texas QB Quinn Ewers made strong impressions on the Las Vegas Raiders. League sources say the Raiders were especially impressed when breaking down film and discussing X's and O's. That said, taking either of them with the number 6 overall pick would be a reach. Right now, Milroe is ranked 77th overall, and Ewers is sitting at 100. However, don't be surprised if Milroe and Howard rise into late second-round territory in the next few weeks. Speaking of Will Howard, he recently made it clear at the NFL Combine he'd love to reunite with Chip Kelly, who is now the Raiders' offensive coordinator. Kelly, of course, led 2 top-5 offenses back when he coached the Eagles. Howard had a shaky start to last season, but he's gained momentum in the QB3 discussion. And let's not forget, he delivered in the college football playoff, helping his team win a national championship. When it mattered most, he played his best football. So, Raider Nation, what's your take? Who should the Raiders target in free agency or the draft? Should they do both? Drop your thoughts below. Now, let's talk Raiders news. This one isn't a shocker, but Brock Bowers just had a monster rookie season, 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns as a tight end. That's historic. And with that kind of production, it's no surprise that Michael Mayer, who the Raiders drafted 2 years ago, is now on the trading block. According to The Athletic, multiple teams have reached out to the Raiders about Mayer, and trade discussions are happening. He had a dominant career at Notre Dame, 180 catches over 2,000 yards, and 18 touchdowns in just 3 seasons. He was an absolute beast. The Raiders took him 35th overall in the second round, and his rookie year was tough. 27 catches, 304 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But let's be real. The quarterback situation with Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels was a mess. So, what should the Raiders do next? Is Mayer worth keeping, or should they move on? Let's discuss. Now, back to Michael Mayer. Last season was rough. 21 catches, 106 yards, and 0 touchdowns. On top of that, he missed 6 games in the middle of the year due to personal reasons. And when he returned, he was barely a factor in the offense. But here's the thing. He's still only 23 years old and locked into a cheap contract for the next 2 seasons. That makes him an intriguing buy low target for teams, whether they're contenders or rebuilding squads. According to reports, multiple teams have already inquired about him, so we'll see if the Raiders decide to move on. Now, shifting back to the draft, we're still 2 months away, but the more I dive into it, the more I'm sold on both Will Howard and especially Jaylen Milroe. Milroe is just an electric playmaker. He put up 20 rushing touchdowns last season at Alabama. That kind of dual-threat ability is exactly what the Raiders need at quarterback moving forward. So, what do you think? Should the Raiders go all in on a young quarterback? Let me know in the comments. That's it for me. Hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily Raiders and NFL content. See you in the next one.